So this is the OnePlus Nord N10 5G, and this is a cheaper version of the OnePlus Nord that was released not too long ago. I wouldn't call this a budget phone, but I'd call this a budget mid-range phone. Not as expensive as the mid-range price point, but cheap enough that it kind of crosses both territories. Now this is 350 euros, and I think if you're looking at this, you're probably thinking about the Pixel 4a too, just because both devices are very similar in a lot of ways, but have different features that make one stand out over the other. I don't mind this design. It's a little flashy for my taste, and some of you might like that. Depending on how the light reflects off it, you get this black and blue look, which looks very classy or tacky, depending on how you feel. But it's plastic. It's a plastic phone. You feel this thing, it doesn't have that glassed heft that other smartphones have. In fact, I personally like the way the Pixel 4a looks over it. I know it looks simple and minimalistic, but sometimes clean is better. And then you take it to the front, where the Pixel 4a has a smaller display, only 5.81 inches compared to the bigger 6.5. But here's the thing, look at these bezels. The bezels on the Pixel 4a feel smaller. This phone is thinner and lighter. It feels more like a cohesive unit, whereas this has like the glass and the frame of the body looking a bit separated. Now, these are minor differences. These are super subjective, and I think for a lot of people, it's gonna come down to the experience. But if you're looking for that one-handability, it's a lot better on the Pixel 4a. Displays are interesting because OnePlus has gone with a bigger one. It's 6.5, but it's not OLED. This is an IPS LCD panel, and the benefit of this is that you do get 90 Hertz, but you don't get those inky blacks and bright colors that the Pixel 4a provides. This is an OLED display. It's 60 Hertz, but it's OLED. And I'd rather look at this display than the LCD panel that's on this OnePlus Nord. Now, there are a couple of trade-offs. Like if you go for the OnePlus device, you get the 90 Hertz, but you don't get HDR. But if you go for the Pixel 4a, you don't get 90 Hertz, but you do get HDR. So depending on which one you might value more, might help make your decision. Now, what is it with only budget and mid-range phones coming with headphone jacks? The Nord has its headphone jack on the bottom and the Pixel 4a has one on top. Like, I get it, you know, buying wireless earbuds don't have the same sound experience. They can be more expensive than having wired headphones, but it's like saying all people who buy budget phones are too cheap to buy more expensive ones to buy truly wireless earbuds. I think even people buying more expensive phones still prefer wired headphones at times just because of the sound experience you can get and the fact that you probably have tons of wired headphones lying around. Either way, it's there on both devices. Now the stereo speakers on both are pretty good. They both have dual speakers to make it a stereo pair, but I will say the speakers on the Pixel 4a get a bit brighter, are less muddy at max volume, and sound better overall. So this is interesting. You'd think the Pixel 4a with the Snapdragon 730 would be faster than the 690 that's inside of the N10. But funny enough, the N10 does perform better. That 690 chip provides better single core and multi-core clock speeds. Now these are just benchmarks, okay? Don't read too much into it. Based on my actual personal experience, the Pixel 4a is slightly faster. I find there's a tiny bit less micro lag, and opening and closing apps on the Pixel 4a happens to be a bit quicker than what's happening on the N10. This could come down to simply Google being better at optimizing their own software compared to other companies. But it's not a huge difference. The only areas where I did seem to have a big effect was the camera app. The camera experience, at least in terms of opening and closing the app, on the N10 was quite poor. It took a little bit longer to take a picture, and there'd be times where the camera app would just crash and I'd have to restart the phone. So since we're talking cameras, the OnePlus definitely has more lenses, and I think if you're a consumer who doesn't know much about smartphones, that might look more attractive to you. But even though the OnePlus device has the bigger wide lens at 64 megapixels, an ultra wide at 8, depth at 5, and a 2 megapixel macro lens, I'd still take the one camera on the Pixel 4a over the OnePlus NT any day of the week. Like, these photos just always look great. I know what to expect. The Pixel is consistent. Their computational photography has been fine-tuned over the past few years. Don't get me wrong. Both of these devices take fantastic photos during the day, but I just like the color science of the Pixel. Now there are some differences, like even though this does have a telephoto mode on the OnePlus device, it's not actually a telephoto camera, it's just using the big wide lens to crop in. There's no ultra wide on the Pixel, but I find I'd rather have the better photos. Nighttime is where the Pixel really shines. Like the nighttime photos just look so much better compared to what OnePlus is doing. And if you want to take nighttime selfies, you can't do it with the OnePlus device. You can only do it with the Pixel 4a. Both of these devices take great 4K video, but of course, they're very limited with the type of processor that's inside of here. Now, software is interesting because both of these smartphones have a very clean and minimalistic Android experience, and I really truly value that. So you can't go wrong with either one. The only thing I will say though is that if you buy the Pixel, you will be getting updates instantly. As soon as it's available to the public, it will be out on your Pixel 4a. Whereas with OnePlus devices, you might have to wait a few months to get the latest version of Android. Battery life has been excellent on both phones, however, slightly better on the N10 just because of that bigger battery size. I was able to have the phone last longer. These are both one-day phones without any issues, so you're not gonna have to charge up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 18-watt charging on the Pixel 4a compared to 30-watt charging on the N10, so you can top up the battery faster. None of these phones support wireless charging. So here's the thing. Both of these phones pack a lot of greatness for the price, and I can't wait to see more phones like this, especially in the type of world we're living in right now. Cheap to mid-range phones are so good, and it makes it very hard to recommend the more expensive ones. Either device is a great choice, but I personally prefer the Pixel 4a. It has the better camera, it has the slightly better software experience, and I personally like the design better. But if you want the OnePlus device, it's gonna be a good experience too. You just gotta ask yourself what you prioritize more. Do you prioritize the better camera? Do you want 5G? Do you want a 90 Hz display instead of OLED? Those are the things you need to decide for yourself because a lot of the characteristics between both of these devices come down to personal preference. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope it made it a little bit easier to choose between either device, because if it did, please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.